To all the Indians here, it's probably a very familiar face. To our non-Indians, there is some explaining to. But you do look like a Bollywood actor. So even without knowing you,
Wolfgang, with that image of yours there, you look like a Bond villain.
Well,
handsome bald villain.
See, that's my
Let's
fate.
see you do it. The name's Bond, James Bond.
Absolutely. My name is Wolf.
That's even better.
That's even better. Okay, if we could all get seated. Vivek, please have a seat.
Thank you.
Vivek, let me just do a quick intro. So Vivek is a well-known Indian actor. I said we're going to go to Bollywood in the end, and entrepreneur and philanthropist. And beyond acting, Vivek has established himself as a successful entrepreneur with a family office of managing multiple ventures with a team of 300 people?
Close to 2,500 people across the
2,500.
spectrum, yeah.
2,500 people across different vehicles. Okay, last time I checked, it was 300, and now it's already 500. Now,
It's
Vivek,
the Indian population. It grows very fast.
It seems so. Vivek, you had a very successful career in acting. What's your story as an entrepreneur?
Well, I actually started my entrepreneurial journey way before I started being an actor. It began with my dad conning me out of my pocket money when I was about 15 years old and getting embarrassed that I had this prettiest girl in college for a date, but not money to pay for it. So it kind of made me want to make my own money. And with the blessings of my father, I just decided that I want to do something on my own. And the entrepreneurial journey started with looking for opportunities in gaps while I was still in the college ecosystem. And then I realized I was good at this, and I started fine-tuning it, started reading about it, learning about it, and kept expanding. By the time I was 16, 17 years old, I had already apprenticed at the stock markets, learned from brokers, and understand how the stock market works on the inner wheels of the stock market. Then went into commodities, learned how they work, and then from there went into actual value creation from trading. I'd already started trading by then. By the time I was about 17, 18, I'd created a substantial for a college student, substantial portfolio, speculated, lost almost all of it, and then rebuilt it from scratch again. But then realized I want to build value. And I was about 19 when I started looking at technology. Created my first company, which was an SCFE company, a supercritical fluid extraction plant, looking at nutraceuticals, which I thought was the future at that time. So raised capital for it, built the company, sold the company, made my first million at a young
actually,
age.
Business came before acting?
It did. So started out with business, and then acting was always the dream. It was the passion. It was what I cherished. It pretty much took over. And about 23 years later, 67 movies later, I said, okay, I need to give a little more time to scaling up my businesses. So it's been fun.
Now, you're mainly known as an actor, I guess, to the general public.
I'm trying to overcome that.
But
it's difficult.
you're almost more even more successful in the business world. When you started, it's always interesting to have people talk about how they got started. What did you find hardest when you got going in business? What was really hard, and what would you advise young founders today to do differently from what you did?
I think, a lot of people would perceive me being an actor, a popular face, at least within the Southeast Asian diaspora, being advantageous. And it has its advantages, but it's a double-edged sword. Why I say that, Wolfgang, is when you walk into a room and you start to speak, and if you're working with a co-founder, you're working with a partner, whenever there's a technical question or a financial one, they'll look at the other guy. And the assumption will be, he's an actor, he's a dumb blonde, right? So it's that thought process. They look at the other guy and you'd be like, excuse me, but I think I can answer this better, So I've experienced that. So you have had to overcome this overarching image in the room that when you start speaking about the numbers, though, and when you start presenting the case, it reverses. Now there's an amplification or magnification where they're suddenly like, oh, wow, didn't see that coming from you. So that then works in your favor. But it always starts, the other way around. I've built multiple businesses. I've always pursued value. And for me, positive social impact is important. I love jewelry. As you can see, I'm wearing a bunch of diamonds. But I hated the fact that there was so much lack of transparency in jewelry and in diamonds especially. And exploitation was a part of the whole story, no matter what you said. So went into lab-grown diamond jewelry 2 years ago. And today, the company is in 7 countries, 23 cities, and going public this year. So the exponential scale and pace at which you can do things, if you have an ecosystem that you've built, where you use your brand to leverage your B2C, but also use your skills to set up the business, raise the capital efficiently and effectively, and then eventually take it quickly to organic profitability, not just focus only on growth, and then monetize by taking it on the markets and making it a success. So I've taken 12 companies public in India. I have a 72-member team that's just dedicated to that, that division. This year I take 5 companies public more. So the whole idea is not just to invest and then wait for somebody else to come and bail you out or buy out, from another larger fund, but actually create the final end product, because everybody who's buying it is looking to scale it and eventually list it. So why not do it yourself?
Help us understand the Indian startup market and also the Indian market for IPOs. Can you give a number how many IPOs we had last year?
It's a very interesting aspect. Let me just tap on the startup ecosystem first. The startup ecosystem in itself, there's a lot published about it. I got involved quite early. In 2013, I got a private university license from the government of Gujarat to set up India's first startup and innovation university called Swarnim. Rahul here was also involved then. Worked with the government, worked with students, collaborated with them, tried to bring a curated grants to startups that were actually executing, but also bring in some degree of responsibility and some degree of reporting for the grants that were taken from the startups. So literally I've been in that ecosystem from the beginning. I think I'm seeing a marked change in the psyche of Indian startups now, where following the Western idea of just throw money at it, keep burning, and spray and pray kind of ideology is shifting very quickly. People are looking for organic profitability, inherent profitability, faster routes to get profitable so that they can sustain. They're not always chasing the runway, right, without ever taking off. So that I think is a big dramatic change. The IPO ecosystem is fascinating right now. If you look at, I don't know what the population of Switzerland is.
Who is Swiss?
That's the population.
Let's say 10 million.
Right, so let's say Switzerland, let's say
10 million, let's say.
UK has about 55 million people, 60 million people. If you look at just National Stock Exchange in India, there's 2. There's National Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange. Just National Stock Exchange has 190 million accounts. And these are not accounts that are representations through ETFs, mutual funds, SIPs, systematic investment plans, through the banks. No, these are individual trading accounts where people are actively trading. If you look at those 190 million accounts, they're actually owned and managed and operated by about 100 to 110 million people, right? So I'm just showing you participation. And if you look at that, that's about 6 to 7% of the population. And if you look at any other developed economy across the world, participation, individual participation in the stock markets is anywhere between 21% to 35%. So if you just look at that participation, and if everything else stays the same and static, a $5 trillion market cap is bound to head towards $20 to $25 trillion market cap. So the rising tides are going to lift all the boats. Now within this, if you're in a sunrise sector, if you're in a sector that's exciting and advancing very fast, you're rewarded with higher PE multiples. I took a SME IPO company public, 2 of them last year. One was 200 times oversubscribed. The other one was 550 times oversubscribed. The difference between the 2 was, on an SME level, the second company was more relatable to people because it also did VFX for a lot of Bollywood movies. Like, oh yeah, that movie. I know that movie. So you're looking at the number, but there's also relatability. And then you're investing into that. And both these companies are between 60 to 70% up in the last quarter from the value of listing. So if your fundamentals are solid, it's incredible the amount of action that you can get in the Indian IPOs.
So you don't have to go to the US and make it big there. You can make it in India.
You know, there are companies
in
the US that I am reverse merging SPAC style into listed structures that I've taken public in India. I'm taking them, reverse merging them with part cash for growth and the rest of it in stock swaps out of the US, out of Australia, because I know that with our numbers and back-ending a lot of the work into India, reducing the cost centers and optimizing the profit, and getting a better multiple in India than getting a multiple on NASDAQ or the London Stock Exchange.
What role does Web3 play and crypto play in India, and what are you hoping for the future?
So I was just in a conversation with this brilliant lady, Pragya Das. She's the chief economic policy advisor to the Reserve Bank of India. Brilliant mind. And one of the key people involved in the digitization of the rupee, and looking at all the challenges. Are there challenges? Yes. It's a case of the environment moving slower than the people within the environment. So if you're looking at the excitement of participation or the bridging of the trust into any of these spheres, Web3, crypto, blockchain, any of these spaces, the youth is really excited. The people are really excited to be a part of this whole journey. In our education companies and our university, we're also teaching a lot about these. So you see a lot of excitement. But the regulatory framework is still trying to wrap its head around, trying to anticipate. It's funny, like, when you're trying to think of what damage AI can create, just to model or inference the damage, you need AI. Right? You need AI to tell you what the potential future damages AI can create if you have to mitigate that. So it has to be something that you have to jump into as a country, as an organization, as a business. Like in my real estate business, we have about $7 billion of assets under development, all luxury assets. But what's exciting to me here in Davos is I've already met 3 companies who've pitched to me tokenization with an underlying utility of renting those assets out, those luxury assets, and creating a framework where you have an underlying asset base for the token, but also a constant revenue yield potential, and then evaluate from there what the potential of that token could be, right? Now, that's one case. In India, what would I like to see? I'd like to see, with the new policy for the police, blockchain introduced into evidence, scene of the crime, processes that are followed, because they're unmutable. Now, that actually is not so much from an economic perspective, but more from a quality of life, freedom and liberty perspective that could translate into improving the lives, or translate actually into the difference between life and death. Because if you have fudged evidence, you could put somebody in for 20 years into jail for nothing, right?
But you could fudge an entry on the blockchain in that case.
Well, I think there's still I agree with you, but I think it is still a possibility of creating a counter check at that moment. And once it's there, because a lot of the evidence is altered post-entering, right? When you have to be framed. I'm not saying that that's what all the cops do, but in cases that have unraveled, in cases in the past, you've seen that that's been manipulated. So I know that you can not mitigate the entry point at the entry level, but at least you can mitigate once it's done, right?
Okay. Vivek, our job as investors is invest in things that nobody cares about, because once it's on everybody's mind, it's too late. Is there one thing in blockchain that you would like to see that isn't talked about enough today, especially in India, but not limited to
Well, there's something I'm doing. I've built a agritech company that has consolidated over 100 million farmers, farmer families.
100 million?
Yeah. India's a very large country. The one thing we have a lot is population. We are the land that created the Kama Sutra. You have to excuse us.
I give that to you.
So 100 million farmers, all marginal, 2.5 acre holdings each, of which 25 million are women. I'm very proud of that aspect because it's also economically empowering and uplifting women. And our goal was to plug the leakage in the ecosystem, which has been set from British times when we were a colony of the British, the Mandi system, and how to plug that leakage so that the net value actually reaches the last mile to the farmer who's putting the effort and time and energy and uplift his family economically. We've already jumped to about 32% increase in net farmer income using our tech platform, and we're the enabler. With a gross transaction value that's not too high right now, we've reached about, I'm trying to numbers in my head from rupees to dollars, is about close to about $250 million is what we've achieved at this point. But it's exponentially growing. Now there, my whole idea is how do you create qualitative and quantitative checks so that leakages aren't there on a blockchain, which also allows for absolute and complete transparency. And the benefit to the farmer, to the end buyer, the sense of security, and to be able to ensure the entire process from a crop failure, which the government is ready to ensure, down to the logistics end. Every single aspect, if it can be built onto a blockchain with a reverse bidding platform on already pre-empaneled vendors, and you can give the service end-to-end, whether I'm looking at creating food security for Saudi Arabia and consolidating 10 million farmers who are only doing built-to-suit farming, like growing exactly what's required, or for a Nestle who wants to make chips or wants to make something else, Pepsi Foods, or whether it's an individual trader or if it's a bakery or it's a store that's looking at, you know, the end product. How do we create something that's blockchain enabled and smart contracts that are instant and quickly in time without human intervention? Because we're going to need that with the scale of contracts and the number of people. We're trying to reduce it by creating FPOs, organizing farmers, so enabling them to create best practices with 5,000, 10,000, 25,000 farmers in a single organization. But eventually the smart contract numbers will still grow higher.
That's quite amazing. People always talk about lack of applications for blockchains outside of in the industry. And if I hear you talking about this use case in the agricultural sector, making a real impact on 100 million farmers in India.
That's just the beginning.
That's just amazing.
That's just the beginning. Look, here's my thinking. When planes first came about, we read stories about people saying, I'm not trusting getting onto a plane. I don't know if that thing will go down like the Hindenburg. I'm okay going on photo by rail, you know. I think adaptation requires some degree of connect. So many of us outside of this room, you guys are all crazy techie wizards, but regular folks like me, unless we have a technology touch our lives, we don't really recognize it. We don't really adapt to it. If you take COVID, for example, all the elderly folk in India who had their fixed walk in the afternoon to buy their, you know, vegetables from the market and from their regular grocer and then would bring it back home, had to adopt to ordering online. And then post-COVID, when they could walk back again, they just continued to order online, right? So that adoption happened because it touched their lives in a certain way. I think the minute utility, I think that's the thing that a lot of young leaders, a lot of young techie, brilliant minds here forget to think about. The utility in terms of the use case. That's what I talk to them when I'm looking at investing also or building or collaborating. I'm saying, what's the utility? What's the use case? Because utility creates a connect point. And when a connect point is established, you have people who become adopters and say, I believe in blockchain, it works. You believe in Bluetooth? Nobody turns around and says, I don't believe in Bluetooth. Because if you want to put your headphones on, you have to believe in Bluetooth. It works. You believe in Wi-Fi. If I told you you could sit here and connect and, 20 years ago, they'd be saying, no, that's wizardry. That's not possible. So there's a lot of trust deficit with these technologies, especially Web3, which needs to be communicated by utility, by connect points. And if there is connect points, you'll have mass adoption. And with mass adoption will come in mass investments. Right now, you're still looking at limited pools of capital. You take a Web3 company public, I don't know what the response is going to be. But if you have touch points and you say, I use this, I love this. I am going to invest in this. That's when you get your 500 times oversubscribed story.
Vivek, I could sit here for another hour talking to you about what you're doing. Your story, your entrepreneurial story, is nothing but astounding. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank
Ladies and gentlemen, Vivek Oberoi.
Thank you. Thank you.